1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast Soundcheck. Friday show live. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Soundcheck. Royal Blue Podcast live. It is the Royal Blue Podcast. It is the Friday show. Welcome and thank you for joining us on today's episode. We are live on YouTube and I am your host Ian Kroll, and joining me in the Royal Blue studio today to talk all things Everton, and Leeds, Everton and Jack Grealish, Everton and injury updates. There's plenty on the agenda today. Lads, back in the studio again. I'm sure you're absolutely sick of the sight of me. You okay?
No, not at all, no. Looking forward to Leeds on Monday. Hopefully get back to winning ways at home.
Absolutely. And David Moyes' pre-match press conference this afternoon, which you're eagerly awaiting.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting one. Obviously, we should get some more information on Grealish. Should get some more updates on some of the injury news. Hopefully get clarification as to whether or not Iliman and Dye and Idrissa Gueye will be available for Monday. A lot of their international teammates have already returned to their clubs, so I'd be surprised if they were any different. But club haven't said anything yet. I've asked them, and then they've not.
No pictures, videos released. Or anything.
No, not unless anything goes out while we're on air. So yeah, going to be, and then obviously you've got the transfer window, which I wonder if that win at Villa changes anything. I wonder if the Jack Grealish news changes anything. We'll probably get some answers later on.
Fingers crossed. Chris, let's hope Iliman and Dye and Idrissa Gueye have stopped partying. Yeah. I'm sure they've had a good week following on from the win in the final. You all right? How are things?
Yeah. I don't think either of them are big drinkers. So, they've had 8 days to recover. So hopefully they're both involved in that one. And I think we're all waiting on Jack, aren't we? Messages with broken heart emojis, blue broken heart emojis don't bode well. I don't think, unfortunately. So waiting to see on that one. I mean, the one thing is Everton, and we'll go into this, do have other left wing options, but you have to be a huge blow to lose Grealish if it's any sort of prolonged period on the sidelines, which we're currently fearing, and obviously waiting on what David Moyes says later today. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, we did go into in-depth detail on the Wednesday show with Gav Buckland and Tony Scott with regards to Jack Grealish, how much of a blow it was. Replacements, we will, give Joe and Chris their chance to have their opinion. Obviously, it is a huge blow. Replacement-wise, plenty, as Chris said, which we can come on to in the team selection segment of the podcast. As usual, give us a thumbs up and drop us a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Your support, as always, is greatly appreciated. And get your questions in, get your comments in. I'll read out as many as possible. Today's agenda, we touched on it a little bit there. There is a lot to get through. I'm going to talk about James Garner and his new contract, injuries and fitness with Grealish, Branthwaite, Dewsbury Hall, and a few others, and obviously the game on Monday night against Leeds United. So you've got your usual team selection and scoreline predictions with regard to that. And if we have got time, we are probably running a bit of a shorter show than the usual hour today because Joe's got to get off to Finch Farm. It's a 50-minute journey from here to Finch Farm. That's a hell of a journey, isn't it?
Well, door to door is probably an hour by the time you get through to car parks and do the sign outs for the cars and do the thing and that as well.
Dedication, that's what we like.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Deloitte Football Money League 2026 has been released, and I know we've written an article on the Liverpool Echo website about that, so you can go and read it. But if we've got time, we'll have a little chat and see what that means for Everton. Joe, obviously massive blow for Jack Grealish, probably more. I mean, the fact that we're missing him is a huge blow, but the fact that he's a lone player who, there's a chance that he might never play for Everton again. Obviously, you don't know what's going to happen over the next couple of months. He might recover quickly, but he's certainly, obviously, from what the club is saying, going to be out for a good couple of months and miss a huge portion of the season.
Yeah, the club aren't saying anything other than what they said in the statement so far, which obviously they're waiting the findings of the specialist, which I imagine they will now have, and I would expect that David Moyes will give us the the club's position later. Obviously, there's been a fair bit of speculation, and some reporters who are very good, like Sir David Ornstein, tend to know their stuff. And no one's predicting this is going to be a short-term injury. And I think Jack Grealish's post again, all right, there weren't many. Well, there weren't any words in it, but the broken heart emoji and just the sheer fact that the club put the statement out as well, which they don't always do with injuries. I think everything points us towards having to expect the worst, or if not the worst, expect bad news and probably a prolonged absence. So it's an absolute killer for everyone, for him as well. I really feel for him, because I think that I know he wasn't available for all the games over the Christmas spell, but there were times during a difficult period where I thought he wasn't always successful in this, but I thought he worked really hard to try and pull a depleted Everton through some of those more difficult games. I thought he was one of the few that came out of Brentford with any real credit. I thought he tried really hard to keep the club going, keep the team going on that front. Picked up those 2 assists, and obviously I think he created the chance for Dwight McNeil in the very early stages as well, which it was a decent save, and it wasn't a golden opportunity by any stretch of imagination. But Everton did start that game okay, and then just blew up once Igor Thiago got that goal after about 10, 11 minutes. But, we had that fantastic win at Aston Villa, and obviously that was a very emotional game for him for all sorts of reasons, going back to his boyhood club, mixture of emotions as well, because, it's funny, and I kind of saw a few people, Aston Villa people, kind of explaining this, but and I get it, obviously big boos during the game, because obviously they're trying to put him off. They want to be hostile to him. They don't want Everton to come and win it. Aston Villa, they're not going to take any joy from seeing one of their great players come back to haunt them. But it was quite funny. Obviously, you see all that during the match day, but then obviously where they're in the stadium, and as is always the case, the press box is nestled in amongst the home fans, and there was no shortage of appreciation for him in there before and after. Mainly before the final whistle. Signs up asking for his shirt. He got really warmly applauded on and off when he was doing his warm-ups and things like that as well. So, he did that. He comes out. Thomas Tuchel's there. We know he's desperate to get to the World Cup and get into that England squad again. And, we saw them in animated conversation in the bowels of Villa Park. And you just thought that was another good performance. I don't think he was Everton's best player at Aston Villa, but I thought he was very, very good again. And, you felt like, he was building towards something, just like maybe Everton might be able to build towards something this season. And probably the ambitions of both may well, they're certainly entwined. Whether or not they're completely reliant on each other, we'll have to see how Everton fare without him. But it's an absolute sucker punch for a player who really has settled in well at Everton on and off the pitch, and is a big part of what David Moyes is trying to do this season.
Chris, with the injuries that we've had, I mean, every team has injuries. There's no question about that. But with the injuries to Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, Jared Brandthwaite, just Alcaraz, just to name 3 players there, along with AFCON with Iliman Ndiaye and Idrissa Gana Gueye, being away for a good couple of weeks. Is it just modern football these days where you just never, or you never get the possibility to pick your best team? You're always trying to juggle what's better or what's best to be available to you, because let's face it, we've literally had a month of Iliman Ndiaye, without Iliman Ndiaye, and then we think, right, Illy back on the right, Grealish on the left, and now that's just out the question.
Yeah, I think that what it does, I was alluding to before, sort of more actually highlights the right wing, because Iliman Ndiaye finished top scorer last season, predominantly playing on the left wing. Dwight McNeil can play there. It's his most natural position, arguably. And even when he gets fit again, Charlie Alcaraz can play in that role. But then, with Iliman Ndiaye, who's excelled moving over to the right this season, it obviously opens things up on the right, because Tyler Diblin's been given opportunities and hasn't been wholly convincing. And it seems that the manager isn't convinced for him. He's playing Dwight McNeil, one of the most left-footed players on the planet, and that right wing is an inverted winger ahead of him. So for me, actually, it's more of a question mark on the right wing. As much as it's like Joe said, it's a crushing blow to lose Grealish, a player of his magnitude, such a clever player in terms of plays the game at his own pace and winning fouls and stuff like that, getting the team up the pitch, occupies more than one opponent at any single moment. It probably opens things up on the other side, because presumably Ndiaye comes over back to the left, or one of those other players, and then you probably play a light on the other side. So I just wonder whether, if they were to go and do business, I don't think they need to get another left winger, ironically. probably looking at on the other side of the pitch.
Tony Scott disagrees with you on that one.
Okay, what's he saying?
He wants Everton to go out and buy a pretty much exact replacements for Jack Grealish.
Okay, fair enough.
You got some compliments from the comments on today's live stream.
Okay.
All right.
Ken Sprayer says, "Good to see you retain the sensible panel today, Ian."
Oh, wow.
And the County Road Bobblers says, "Bezo, the wolf of Old Hall Street, well dressed as always." Says, "Great cast today, lads." Brandthwaite left back, getting back in the team. Played well there before, and can maraud forwards. Talk to me. We can come on to that. That's a good point, actually.
Yeah, I saw that. It was an interesting point. To somebody, I think he did make that online in terms of a way of getting Brandthwaite out back in the team without disrupting the centre-back partnership. It's a really interesting call, that one.
It's certainly a way of getting him back into the team if you want to play O'Brien, Tarkowski, etc. But for me, again, we'll come on to it. I think Moyes needs to make some harsh decisions on certain players, but we'll come on to that. Joe, the Pies 1878 says it's a bigger blow for Grealish than it is for us. Do you agree with that? Because Chris has obviously mentioned there that we have got potential replacements to go in on the left-hand side. I think probably what he means is, assuming, is that Grealish obviously desperate to get in the England squad for the World Cup. That is looking increasingly unlikely now. I mean, you don't want to separate the two because we should be in this together, but is it more of a blow for Grealish than it is for us?
Yeah, quite possibly. But I think from an Everton perspective, it probably depends on, firstly, whether or not Everton try and get another winger in, and if they do, if they're successful in that, and then if not, it depends on how well the supporting cast do. And McNeil played well on the right last week at Aston Villa, but for me, he's not a right winger. Tyler Diblin is someone who has had a slow start to his Everton career. I think there are good reasons for that. I kind of want to say now is the time to kind of come and rely on him and try and give him a push. I think that time was probably a month ago, and he's had a degree of opportunity in that and kind of been up and down, hasn't he? Thought he played very well at Forest, thought he played quite well at Burnley, and struggled in poor team performances in other games. If this was the making of Tyler Diblin as an Everton player on the right, if you move Iliman Ndiaye to his best position on the left, and this opened up the opportunity for Diblin, and he took it, and both he was given the best chance of success in that role by those around him, including Moyes, and he was able to take it, then by all means, I think this is something that Everton could manage their way through. What we have seen, I think, for probably the last 6 weeks or so, is that Moyes, even when given the opportunity and probably having the need to use Tyler Diblin, has still been reluctant to put complete faith in him. And if we end up in a scenario where it's Dwight McNeil on the right, Iliman Ndiaye on the left, then I think that Everton are certainly a lot worse off. I mean, my starting point for dealing with this would be to introduce Diblin on the right and move Ndiaye on the left, but my backup would have to be McNeil on the left, not the right, and we haven't really seen McNeil on the left, which I think is probably the only position I'm comfortable with him playing, and I think he's very good in that position in a certain setup, as we saw under Sean Dyche, but I can't quite fathom the continuation of him on the right of midfield. It just doesn't really make a huge amount of sense to me.
I said as much on Wednesday. I'm in complete agreement with regards to that. Chris, just a final point on this Grealish injury. Interesting question from Ken Sprayer. I'm going to read it, but I don't necessarily maybe agree with it. I guess Ken's only just asking the question, but he says, "Do you think modern pitches are contributing to injuries?" The only thing I'd say about that is, just off the bat, is that if you look back at pitches from like the 70s and 80s, and I mean, it's nothing in comparison to how advanced and modern they are now.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the pitches, if anything. I just think, to be fair, they would probably be better for the players. Still trying to, as I asked the question, I haven't been given the answer earlier this week whether this injury was sustained at Aston Villa or whether it was in training. So
it's a weird one, was it? Because he was seen talking to Tuchel, wasn't he?
So yeah, maybe it's another one we might find out today. Yeah, I don't know where he's come from. The pitches. It's a foot injury, isn't it? I think he's more likely, possibly. And I'm not a medical expert, but the boots that they wear are so thin, aren't they? Maybe that's more of a contributory factor, because in order to have the pace and the movement, they were, more or less like slippers, aren't they, compared to more robust boots of yesteryear. On the one hand, I think that the old pitches are probably more likely to give you an injury, but you might have had more sort of protection from the thicker boots. But I don't know, maybe some industry expert might correct me on that one. But yeah, I'm not too sure about the pitches, and I don't know.
What was your go-to football boots back in the day?
Back in the day, I still play. Don't know when I go. Back in the day, I just tend to go. Well, when I was younger, I'd never went for like the crazy colours, but I might have had a more of a colourful one. But now I'm firmly in the veterans category. It is just the plain black for me, old school.
Fair enough. We'll move on. Joe, the James Garner contract. I don't know. There's been one or two reports maybe this week that things are advancing and things are positive and potentially, could be signing over the next couple of weeks. Have we got any updates from you on regards to that? Or
yeah, well, one of those was my reports. So, I wrote a story yesterday saying that the talks they're getting pretty close to it. So, yeah, I think we're probably moving towards a situation where there's an expectation of positive news on that. Obviously, it's been ongoing for some time. These talks started well before Christmas. I think that the reality is that although it's been a peculiar thing, transfer windows and speculation around them is always a strange thing, especially when you're kind of following one club and seeing how the world is reacting to them and everything, and the speculation around clubs kind of mounting, having a realistic chance of getting James Garner has been quite interesting. There have been clubs interested, in Serie A and in the Premier League as well. I think they've been monitoring the situation, but it's never been as straightforward as saying that James Garner's contract is up in the summer, therefore he'll be a free agent there because of the opportunity to extend it by a year that is essentially in Everton's favour. It's a performance-based one. It's a relatively high number, but it's one that unless he gets a serious injury, I think both parties expected it to be met. And I think that's part of the backdrop to why these conversations have been drawn out over quite a while. The fact that, in essence, I don't think either side really expected their James Garner to not be there next season. So, the issue was tying him down to a longer contract, and they had a little bit more time to do that. And certainly from Moyes' perspective, he was kind of he's been relatively patient throughout. He hasn't been panicking, largely because the player is quite keen to stay, I think. And I don't think that's changed. He likes it at Everton, and I think it's just trying to find a package in terms and timescales of things like that everyone's happy with, because I think one thing that probably has changed with Garner is that he's become a much more important player for Everton than he was maybe 6 months ago. I think I was one of quite a few in the camp of not being sure where he'd end up this season, in the sense that would he become one of Moyes' trusted starting midfielders, or would he be a player that Moyes would Everton sign a big money centre midfielder, and he'd be one that was kind of pushed to the periphery a little bit. We saw glimpses of his talents in the years since he signed, but again, in a often poor side that certainly played tactics under Dyche that weren't particularly conducive to the best of James Garner's game. We hadn't seen him set the world alight at the club. I think it's fair to say that I don't think Moyes is being over the top when he heralds him as one of the best centre midfielders in the Premier League this season. Now, obviously, him getting to the England side, which is what Moyes keeps backing him to do, there are a lot of talented players in that England side, and that's a big step up for him. But I think he's certainly done well to put himself in the conversation, because he's been brilliant. And again, mentioned it with Grealish a little bit in terms of dragging the side through a difficult period in such. Well, Garner's certainly done that, because he was absolutely excellent at Aston Villa, and he was excellent at Nottingham Forest as well. Obviously, got the goal and the assist in that game as well. And if you look at in terms of individuals and the impact that they've had on that team, certainly, when the chips have been down, it's been difficult the last few weeks. He's right up there. Even Sunderland was a bad day. I thought Garner and Harrison Armstrong, in the middle, probably two of the few to come out of that game where you thought, they still tried that. I think everyone's trying their best, but they've still done everything they could, even within their gift, to have an impact on those games. So that's it. Obviously, as a result of that, if your manager is saying that you should be in the England squad week in, week out, then you can imagine that you want that to be reflected a little bit in terms of the contract talks you're then having with the club. But I don't think he's been particularly difficult over this at all. I think this has just been one of those ones where there's been a lot of to-in and fro-in, and the fact that both sides have seen that extension as almost expecting it to be triggered is probably why it's been drawn out. So, hasn't been announced yet, but I think they're they're pretty close. So there's a degree of confidence there.
Sounds positive. Chris, just looking at this from like a different angle, I guess, how careful do you think the club needs to be when it comes to managing situations with wages? The only reason I ask is because obviously James Garner, his form has improved dramatically over the past couple of months, and that is obviously another string to his bow when it comes to negotiations. And the club have had issues where they've had players on high wages and been desperate to get them off the wage bill. You know, you only look back at last season. Decore, Calvert-Lewin, probably two, who were of the highest and probably wanted an increase in their wages. In negotiations. The only reason I bring it up is because obviously we've had Jared Brandthwaite. He's been offered a new deal, which he accepted. Probably, I don't know the exact terms, but I'm sure it's one of the best paid players at the club. But then we've done that in a sense to obviously offer him a long-term deal, but fend off interest from like United. I'd put James Garner in this category now. You've obviously got Iliman and Dye. Again, I don't know his personal terms and what he's on, but you've got Inter Milan, whether they're true or not, reports coming in saying they want to buy. All these players are kind of moving up a bit in the world and improving as they go. So they're going to want better wages. They're going to want higher wages, and Everton obviously needs to be careful to balance that. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, but it can only be a good thing. That's why you sign these type of players, don't you? And to be fair, I mean, we've had so many ins and outs going on about Kevin Felwell's pluses and minuses and what he did or he didn't do during the club in difficult circumstances. These are, a couple of ones you've mentioned there have been a couple of his standout buys, James Garner and Iliman and Dye, getting those, relatively modest fees really in the modern Premier League transfer market in terms of, what was it, 15 million for Dye and 9 million initial outlay for James Garner. They're the young players who you think will develop under it. They're both in many ways actually classic David Moyes signings, even though they both obviously came to the club before David Moyes came back. They're a sort of profile of a player that Moyes was so good at developing in his first spell at Everton. So, yeah, I think it's only right that he gets the deal rewarded with it. I mean, it was unfortunate with Brandthwaite when it was absolutely terrific news that he committed his future to the club with a 5-year deal, and then obviously he hasn't kicked a ball all season. I mean, it's one of those in football. It's unfortunate. It can happen. James Garner's had injuries, to be fair, in his time at Everton so far. He's not had any shockers, but he's had significant spells on the sideline. So we've been fortunate he's kept himself fit more or less all season, and hopefully that can continue. But yeah, I think it's good to have those sort of players who can develop hopefully with the club and get them tied down to the future.
Would you expect talks to begin with the Iliman and Dye contract soon?
I think the club have got quite a few bits and pieces to sort out, haven't they? Because there are a fair few players that are entering the last 6 months as well for some of the extensions that they've done. So I think what they probably need to do is, after they've got this transfer window out of the way, is settle down and see what their priorities are. And if they keep their powder dry in this January transfer window, whilst I can understand an argument for that, there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that this side still needs strengthening in the summer. So it depends on where their priorities are. But look, I mean, Iliman and Dye has been a fantastic player this season. He was a very good player last season. So, and I think his start has risen further probably at the start of this season because of some of the things that he's done. So yeah, I think if there's any opportunity to tie him down for longer, then they'd probably try to take that. So.
I think more than anyone in the team, in Dye.
Right,
the star has risen. Obviously Garner, you could argue Garner, but you just see all over social media now and pundits on national media just raving about Dye, don't you? And although, as Chris said, that's a positive because it means Everton are doing well. I do feel it's also a concern as well.
Although, to be fair, David Moyes, on the occasions he has been asked, he's been adamant, hasn't he, that there hasn't been any bids. A couple of times, it was last week he said it, and then he said it about Inter in the past as well, because it was reported by other outlets that there was a bid over the summer, and on both occasions. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of interest because, like you say, he's a great player, but the manager himself has been adamant on both occasions that there's been no official contact in terms of offers for Dye.
Obviously, Joe, Moyes' press conference is after this podcast has been recorded, so we might have more of an update. But do you know anything on Kiernan Dewsbury Hall? Do you think he'll be in the squad on Monday? What are we hearing on that?
There's quite a few players on the periphery, aren't there, of being involved, and there's a big when you've been out for such a long time. When you've been out for such a long time, throwing them straight back into the match day situation is difficult, isn't it? I was surprised that Coleman was involved on Sunday, albeit I think that with Coleman and Moyes kind of acknowledged this at the start of the summer last year about saying that a lot of what he sees the value in Coleman is what he brings off the pitch, and having him as a presence in the dressing room is clearly an important one. I mean, I did speak to him about Coleman, and I wrote a piece earlier this week where he still thinks that, or certainly hopes that he can do a job on the pitch as well. Coleman, he still wants to be able to have the opportunity to select him, knowing the talents and the experience he does have. Hopefully, that doesn't mean that they're not looking at getting a new right back in, because obviously that's an area I keep saying on here that I think should be an absolute priority, even, and should be done this month if they could do it. They've had plenty of time to kind of scout and get a shortlist up there. That's no issue. But yeah, Dewsbury Hall was posted on Instagram yesterday, which basically looked about as close as you could get to a "I'm back now," like as it could possibly be without saying "I'm back now."
15 different images he included in there.
So he clearly thinks he's reached a tipping point, everything like that. We've kind of been pointing, although the club's never said it, the things I've written and when we've been on here, I've been pointing to around this time as expecting him to be in and around it. There's a danger for Moyes, I think, though, in terms of, especially when you have the Grealish injury, in seeing these players come back and wanting too much from them too soon. You've got to manage their recovery as best as you can. I don't know if they'll be involved in the 21s games or not. With Branthwaite, it's something that they have done in the past. I would probably like to see with Branthwaite, bearing in mind that he hasn't kicked a ball this season. Wouldn't mind seeing him involved in an under 21s game too, or a bounce game behind closed doors or something like that. Dewsbury Hall hasn't been out for quite so long, has he? But it's still been a bad injury for him. So I wouldn't be that surprised if we start seeing these players on the bench, but less with a belief that they're going to come in and be able to have an impact, and more just to get them in and around the match day squad and the routines again, that type of thing, and the experience in the dressing room. Like we saw, Coleman was there on Sunday, and yet they still only named 8 substitutes, and that's obviously with 2 goalkeepers as well. So even just fleshing out the bench and just having that wider degree of personality and character and experience in the dressing room, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing players named in the squad as a result of that. Obviously, Idrissa Gueye and Iliman Ndiaye, we know, are fit. It's just a case of the time and the schedules. They will have had even if they start the game on Monday and Iliman Ndiaye walks into that side, Idrissa Gueye, there's probably an argument to be had about centre midfield and where he comes back in. But if they were to start 8 days is a fair old chunk of time, I think, for Iliman Ndiaye. You can have a celebration, you can have a rest, and then he can be involved, I think, for that then. So if they're available to take off some of the pressure, then I hope that nobody goes too quick on some of these players that might have a degree of fragility left in them. But it certainly looks like Dewsbury Hall has made a big step towards a return and is making progress.
I mean, despite not being injured, I would definitely still put Ndiaye and Gueye in that category. Fatigue over tournament football hits differently to normal, regular scheduled football matches. So with all the travelling as well, I mean, you are right, he walks straight back into that team, whether that's on the left or the right will remain to be seen. But the last thing you want is another long-term injury to an important player. So I guess we'll see. We trust, obviously, the manager and the medical team on that. Chris, Charlie Alcaraz, we haven't heard anything really from the club or Moyes with regards to him. I don't know whether the club need to take a picture of him with today's Echo, just to make sure he's still around and stuff like that.
Going to Adrian Heath territory, come on.
No, I mean, very frustrating season for him so far. We all expectations, I guess, from the fans were right up there following his loan spell, and obviously he was brought in. Struggled to get into the team because obviously, Dewsbury Hall, Grealish and Ndiaye all, occupied those positions that he probably play in. But yeah, it's I That's a weird one. Moyes and the club being coy on certain players, aren't they?
Yeah, not getting a lot of information in terms of details over injuries at the moment. So yeah, I can't tell exactly where he's up to, because when people are asking the questions, they're not getting the answers. But yeah, it has been tough for him in terms of he came in. Obviously, he first signing of the summer. They got that deal done, turned into a permanent before just right at the end of May, didn't he? And then Moyes goes on and signs 3 attacking midfielders in August. So through the door, it's Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, Jack Grealish, it's Tyler Diblin as well. And okay, obviously Diblin's another one who hasn't had the impact, but yeah, there's all of a sudden there's sort of 3 players more or less heady in the pecking order. I know obviously Alcaraz started, didn't he, this season? He was in the side. He was playing right wing at Leeds on the first night of the season. I think he had a poor game there, but yeah, it's been the problem. He's done okay in little patches, but then when he's been given the opportunity, he's not really taken it in the way that, and the manner, some of those displays that we saw from him last season were really impressive. Joe and I were up there, obviously. Newcastle, we talked about that this week, and where does Everton's win at Aston Villa compared to the away wins under Moyes? And I was saying that one still for me has to be the benchmark in terms of obviously the magnitude of the occasion when Newcastle going for the Champions League, and Alcaraz got the winner that day. So yeah, it has been very disappointing for him. But again, with this Jack Grealish injury, if he can get himself fit, there's another opportunity for him there in the coming months.
Okay, because we're short on time, I've made a decision that we'll do the Deloitte Football Money League in a different podcast, and we'll dedicate more of a segment to it. Because we're, again, short of time, we'll go straight to Leeds and the preview of that. Joe, obviously another Monday night game, another midweek game. Leeds are doing okay, I guess.
I think they're doing very well.
Yeah. Calvert-Lewin probably expected to return.
Yeah.
It's well, is he going to get a good reception, do you think, surely?
I hope so. Look, he's done really well at Leeds, and I think a player of his ability and his style would have scored a decent chunk of goals in the seventh side this season. It's a bit of a shame that they kind of brought in the intelligence around what would have been his position after he's gone. But I do still think it was the best for both parties that he left. I think they both needed just a reset and a fresh start, and it might be taking Everton a little bit more to kind of adapt to the brave new world without him than it has for Calvert-Lewin. He's hit a good run of form. I don't think that if he's at Everton, he's playing to the same level. And
no. More pressure. I mean, no regrets or anything like that. Is he 9 Premier League goals? I think it is, isn't it? Something like that.
Something like that, yeah, and some good ones.
It's not a bad return so far, is it?
It's a brilliant return, isn't it? It's a brilliant return, and for a side that's trying to stay up as well. A newly promoted side, and none of them have stayed up in recent years, and Leeds look like they're probably going to do so, just like Sunderland. So, yeah, I just don't think that whether it be headspace or relationship with the club and fans and just everything just kind of got to a bit of a weird place with Calvert-Lewin. I think by the end of, everyone, I don't know, but I just think everyone just needed a fresh start on that. Like I'm sure he'll get on the pitch on Monday. I mean, you want to say there's you don't want to say it, but you feel like there's an inevitability that he'll score, but then chances, well, the expectation will be that Jake O'Brien will be at centre-back, and I think I saw somewhere the other day, and I think this is probably right, that Everton haven't conceded a single goal in the Premier League when Jake O'Brien's been playing at centre-back. So, yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to go through. But yeah, Everton's future wasn't Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I don't think Dominic Calvert-Lewin's future was Everton, and I think that, albeit it's a little bit tough now because he's done so well and Everton have struggled up front, maybe we're only 6 months after the event. I think give it another 6 months or 18 months down the line. I don't think there'll be any regret on either side.
Chris, we know Conor O'Neill was a big fan. I can't remember what your stance on Calvert-Lewin was. I'm sure you obviously thought he was a good player. Yeah. Any regret? I mean, it's easy to have regret
as well, which I think is lost in a lot of things. Yeah. He always spoke eloquently. Like I liked dealing with him off the pitch.
Yeah, he's an absolute model pro. He's a lovely lad. Obviously, that's not enough, But and he scored. He put his body, despite what some of the criticism with Calvert-Lewin seems to be from a physical point of view. But he put his body on the line on numerous occasions for Everton. Scored some huge goals. Those 2 headers in front of the Gladys Street. Obviously, the winner in the Crystal Palace, the 3-2 win in 2022 to maintain Everton's Premier League status, and then the clincher against Liverpool in the first derby win at Goodison for 13 and a half years. So he's got all of that, and he more or less finished with an identical record to Duncan Ferguson in terms of games played and goals scored. I think he played one game more than Duncan. But if I just check my notes here, his goals scored in returns for those last 4 years at Everton, 5, 2, 8 and 3. That's not good enough for Everton's number 9, for Everton's main striker. So he's doing great, isn't he, for Leeds now? He's always been a streaky scorer. And like Joe said, it probably was an inevitable, the best for both parties. I mean, Leeds won't like to hear this, but I think the big surprise, given that the sort of magnitude of clubs who he was being linked to, was that he didn't go to a bigger club. Leeds might not like that, but, you know, they're newly promoted, and that was a bit, other than obviously the connection, although it's South Yorkshire, isn't it? I know it's big York, it's same as Liverpool and Manchester. There's a big Sheffield Leeds rivalry, but, you know, as a Yorkshire lad, he's gone back closer to home there. But, you know, I was surprised when I saw him go to Leeds. But yeah, he's done well. I think he'll get a good reception. I think he's liked as a person, and he's respected for what he did for Everton. And as Joe said, when it came to the contract running down, I think there was an inevitability that it would be a partner of the ways in the end.
Yeah, I mean, there's speculation from my point of view, but if he was to be offered a bigger club, say I think he was close to joining Newcastle at one point, wasn't he? Would he have been the main striker there? Whereas Leeds, he probably is. And Chris, obviously, you mentioned his score and stats. I'll play devil's advocate and make a case for defence for him. Obviously, those numbers aren't good enough, albeit throughout his Everton career, is he fourth now as the top Premier League scorer?
On the Premier League scorer. Has he gone up to...
I think he was third or fourth, wasn't he?
Third behind Duncan, was he? He was... I think is he above Cahill now? Yeah, because it's obviously Lukaku and Ferguson. So, I mean, he's probably third, yeah. I
mean, my question is, I guess... do you get the best out of Calvert-Lewin when you've got a manager who knows how to use him? And obviously you've got the example of Ancelotti, who just said, stay in the box, stay in the 6-yard box, you'll score. We'll get the ball into here, we'll score a bag full of goals. He was obviously, Sean Dyche kept us up as a manager, but there was a lot of criticism at the time for how we were playing, the lack of goals that we were scoring. Calvert-Lewin effectively was just doing a job for the team rather than being a striker who was scored goals. Now, he missed a bag full of chances, Calvert-Lewin, there's no question about that. But is he just being utilised properly now by Daniel Farke at Leeds? Is that a case for defence for him?
It would seem so. To be honest, I don't want to tempt fate here, but that's when you weren't confident with Dominic Calvert-Lewin in the one-on-one situations, almost when he had a bit...
too much time.
Similar myself, when I got too much time to think about, so I'm not comparing. I am comparing myself to Premier League strikers, but yeah, so I assure you, if I got too much time to think about a chance, probably won't take it. But obviously, yeah, if you are the number 9 in the Premier League, you want your player to be ruthless in those situations. As you say, Carlo Ancelotti, that one season when he said play between the two lines of the posts and being a penalty box, 6-yard box striker, he did get the best out of him. That was the best season of his career, and he broke the 20-goal barrier. But of course, that was the strange season that was played mostly behind closed doors, so it's always got to wonder about that one on a longer term basis. What Sean Dyche did, to be fair, was get Calvert-Lewin fit. He made a big thing about getting him fit for that, and he made him available for matches after what had been a really tough time for him in terms of availability. But yeah, he was often isolated, and it was a thankless task a lot of the time leading the line there. But you could say, to be fair, that has continued this season, hasn't it, in terms of Everton strikers this year? Obviously, Tierno Barry's done better of late, 3 in his last 4 starts, but yeah, both Beto and Barry have struggled to get the numbers this season, certainly way behind Calvert-Lewin in terms of what he's doing for Leeds. So it's probably a number of factors. But yeah, Daniel Farke's getting the best out of him at the moment. But as has often been said, he when he does come good, he tends to be a streaky striker. And hopefully he's got to the end of that streak at the moment at a Monday night.
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe's right, and I do agree with him in the sense that the parting of the ways as a mutual decision was probably right. However, the way we've tried to play this season with the wingers and balls into the box, you have to look at Calvert-Lewin and think, well, he would have been ideal. So the fact that there was heavy negotiations about what he wanted, did the club consider, well, what type of striker are we going to bring in? Should we be offering Calvert-Lewin more money or better terms because we're going to need them for the type of players that we're going to bring in. But it's a debate that will probably rumble on. Joe, we've got a couple of minutes left, so we'll finish off with team selection. I know it could change, I guess, after the fact of David Moyes' press conference, but what is your 11 for Monday night?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that would change for me from perspective of the conference would be if he was to say that Ndiaye and Gay weren't available. I'd be a bit surprised with that. So, I mean, I'd be working on the basis that Ndiaye's available, because I think if there was any leeway, and you might have given him a degree of leeway, I think that went with Jack Grealish's injury. At that point, surely you say maybe Idrissa Gay has got more competition. He's players that are in form in that position, and obviously he's older as well. So, but you can protect him a little bit more than you can with Ndiaye. So, I mean, I would stick with the same defence. That's obviously O'Brien at centre back and Patterson at right back. And my go-to would be I'd bring Diblin back into the side on the right and I'd put Ndiaye on the left. That's what I'd do with Tiano Barry up top. Garner's obviously James Garner staying in the middle, and I'd probably keep him with Roland Armstrong because I thought all three of them did really well the other day. So that's probably where I'd go.
Okay, Chris, are you in agreement with that?
I probably am a lot of the way. In terms of giving Diblin a go on the right. It all depends where the two Senegal lads are up to. But if they're fit, stick them back in there. But as Joe said, I think Ilham Ndiaye is surely a shoe-in to return if he's available, whereas Idrissa Gay being older and there is no more competition in that area, you could potentially ease him back in because, to be fair, those lads who Joe's mentioned there in central midfield did really well at Villa.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I've got no problem with Ilham Ndiaye going back on the left, although I would still keep him on the right, and I agree with you. You know, if you're going to do that, it's probably McNeil on the left. But I think if you're going to look at the opposition, it's Leeds, and it's going to be a bruising and physical encounter, and it just will be. You just know it will be. Can Diblin stand up to that? Now, I've called for him to play over the past couple of weeks, and he's obviously let us down to an extent. Fair enough, McNeil, he's not going to be in the same ballpark as a Jack Grealish quality, but he did do okay against the Villa side as well. So that's why he's probably in the team for his his defensive duties and his physicality. So I would, if Ndiaye's fit on the basis that you said, he would be on the right, and McNeil on the left. Although it's seemingly that Diblin's just not ready at this moment in time, and it seems to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a home game, and I think Everton's home form has been difficult in recent weeks, and I think you probably want to be a little bit more progressive and a little bit more ambitious at home. There's no reason to fear Leeds. Everton aren't in a situation where they're in a relegation battle either, so I think that I would want to see Everton try and take the initiative and start fast, and I think that Diblin gives you there's far more potential for him to try and take a game by the scruff of the neck and cause defensive problems. I think, it's clear that it hasn't quite gone to plan with Diblin so far, but on the basis of what we at least were able to see from him at Burnley and Forest, I think there's reason to hope that he's not that far off. And if you start putting him with better players around him, or at least he'll have Patterson behind him, so a proper right back, and Ndiaye on the left will obviously help Everton from an attacking perspective. Tiano Barry's in a little bit more form as well. I think McNeil is probably a more cautious approach, and whilst there's room for pragmatism, I think Everton, with the run they're on at home right now and the positivity of last week, I would want to try and see them be a little bit more attacking at home.
I did make a note of these comments, but Emma EFC and Stephen Dyer have both said, what about Asnu? I did say he could be a suggestion or an option on a previous podcast. So obviously Moyes used him on the left side.
Yeah, I guess it's a good point for what he did in the last few minutes against Sunderland, but he's obviously a million miles away from Ilham and Ndiaye. But as an option off the bench, depending on where they're at and where the squad's at, then yeah. And probably an option off the bench, maybe more likely, given what he did against Sunderland, to do that and bring him on the left and maybe shift Ndiaye onto the right if your Diblin or your McNeil's not working, so potentially.
Scoreline predictions?
I'll go 2-0 Everton.
1-0 Everton.
1-0 Everton. We've got to get Leeds back for that first Premier League game of the season, haven't we? We've got to get a win.
Dirty Leeds.
Well, we didn't play well at all in that game, did we?
Didn't turn up in that game, did they? It's such an enormous. It was so weird that they just didn't turn up, wasn't it? Like
the mind games were going on off the pitch for Joe and I beforehand, but we won't go into that.
I'll go 2-0 as well. I'll go 2-0. Hopefully keep another clean sheet. Let's keep the theme going of O'Brien keeping clean sheets every time he plays. Okay, that is all for today's show. We are going to be back on Monday for the post-match podcast, and I haven't spoken to you about this yet, Chris, but potentially there might be a Tuesday show in the office if you're going to be in the office.
Okay,
but we'll see what happens. I'll speak to you. We'll negotiate it afterwards. As always, give us a like and subscribe to the channel, and yeah, we'll see you again soon. Enjoy your weekend, enjoy the rest of your day. I've been Ian Kroll, joined by Joe Thomas and Chris Beasley, and this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.